So the Bridgerton costumes for this season are wild and I want to talk about them. And no, this video is not going to be about how historically inaccurate they are, because there are like a million videos out there about this topic made by people who are much more qualified than I to talk about this. So what we are going to do is a little analysis of Bridgerton costumes and why they work so well with this series as a whole. And of course, we're going to talk about what happens with Penelope's wardrobe this season. I would love to have a discussion with you in the comments and share thoughts and opinions about all this. So please feel free to write down whatever you're thinking at any point in the video. When the first season of Bridgerton started, I remember a lot of historians and like people in general who care about some kind of historical decency, at least in series, being very upset about the costumes in Bridgerton. And they were absolutely right. Like, the first 5 minutes of the series are an aberration from an historical point of view, and I include myself in that outraged reaction. If we take a closer look at that first scene of the series, the corset scene, it makes absolutely no sense. This is the scene where one of the Featherington girls is getting dressed and they are tightening her corset, while her mother says she should wear it tighter until her waist is the size of an orange or something like that. And first, these corsets were made for tight lacing. That lacing wasn't a thing in this period. Also, they are wearing the corsets over their bare skin, where historically they would be wearing the corsets over a chemise, which is a garment that prevents the corset from rubbing against the skin and being uncomfortable, and also prevents the corset from getting dirty, because at that time clothes weren't washed all that frequently, so it was way easier to clean the garment underneath than the corset itself. But those things are not the ones that made me angry with the series, but the fact that the whole scene made no sense. Because why on earth would you want to squeeze your waist to the size of an orange if the dresses that you're going to wear aren't fitted to the waist? Like, Regency dresses pretty much fall straight down from the underbust to the floor, so you could go to one of these parties and stuff yourself full of macaroons and nobody will ever know because your waist is not defined in these dresses. But after that scene, when I continued watching the series, I started to feel a little less outraged and I started understanding the costumes a bit more. And that's because I realized that Bridgerton is not a period drama, but it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy inspired by the Regency era, just like Game of Thrones. It's a fantasy that has a setting loosely inspired in the medieval times and the War of the Roses and all of that. So we don't say that the dragons in Game of Thrones are unrealistic because we accept them as part of that fantasy world. So in the same way, I started accepting these historical inaccuracies in the costume in Bridgerton and all that polyester and sequins and glitter, because I think they are also part of the world building. What we are watching is a very romanticized version of the Regency times, and we are also watching that through the eyes of the protagonist. And all these protagonists, all these main characters, are young people who are coming of age in all of those parties, who are experiencing how it feels to be out in society, and who are falling in love for the first time. In their eyes, the world is bright and shiny, and of course it's full of glitter. Because what Bridgerton does really well through the costumes is to make us understand the inner world of the protagonist, how they are experiencing things, their wonder and their excitement. And through the costumes, we also see their evolution and their changes in their feelings. And speaking of the inner feelings of the protagonist, one of the ways that Bridgerton has to convey them is through color. You'll probably have noticed that both the Bridgertons and the Featheringtons have their own family colors. The Bridgertons are usually clad in soft shades of blue that suggest elegance and serenity, and the Featheringtons are dressed in bright and usually citrus colors because they are a new family to this high society, and they also have 3 daughters that they want to marry. So they want to be seen. They want to be attracting attention to themselves, especially to their daughter. But when we see those colors interact with each other is when the relationships between the characters start to evolve. And sometimes the colors also give us hints about where the plot is going. For example, during the second season, Kate and Anthony often appear wearing matching colors or matching accessories, for example. Nothing super obvious, but it's there. And that happens even before they are aware of their feelings for each other. Kate's colors in the beginning are dual tones, especially purple, but they sometimes shift to blue as her relationship with Anthony evolves. And in turn, Anthony is also seen wearing some garments with matching purple colors. Also, during this third season, Kate starts to wear more elements that incorporate her Indian heritage, and that also suggests her nostalgia for her home country, and that's kind of foreshadowing what happens at the end of the season when she and Anthony decide to go back to India for a while. In the case of Penelope, she's clearly aware of the role that color plays in her wardrobe. After years of being forced by her mother to wear yellow, when she goes to the modiste with the intention of creating her new look, she specifically tells her that she doesn't want to see a citrus color ever again. Of course, we have to talk about Penelope and her dresses, not only because she's the protagonist in this season, but also because of her radical style change. This is the season in which Penelope decided to take control of her own life. And her first decision towards that goal is to change her clothes, because she's well aware of the power that appearances have in the world where she's in. The first time that we see the result of that decision is when she appears at that ball with that glorious green dress that creates a beautiful contrast with her skin and her hair. Her hair that actually is styled in a very non-period accurate way. It kind of reminds of actresses like Lauren Bacall and all that old Hollywood glamour, and has absolutely no place in a Regency party. But we have already established that we don't care about that. About the color of the dress, green is very obviously a mix of yellow, Penelope's previous color, and blue, the Bridgerton's color, and that's perhaps to remark on her love for Colin. But this particular shade of green is very un-Bridgerton. It's a very deep shade of green, and it's also kind of suggesting that there's something more, that her story is not just a love story. It's not just yellow and blue become green. Her story also talks about personal acceptance, about coming to terms with herself and all the facets of her personality and her identity, including her secret identity as Lady Whistledown. After that party, she chooses to wear more muted shades as she goes back and forth about revealing her secret to Colin, and those shades are very difficult to define. They tend to be mostly around the green, blue, sometimes lilac area, but it's difficult to say which color they are exactly. And that's a conscious decision made by the costume designer. They say that they used several layers of different sheer fabrics in several colors to create kind of a watercolor effect and to make it difficult for the viewer to know which color is the dress, because they didn't want to give away any clues that may indicate if Penelope ends up with Colin or not. And I think this is a really nice touch that adds to the significance of the costumes in this series, but also it adds a lot of depth and complexity to Penelope's dresses. And I really like that because she's also a very deep and complex character. On her other dresses, I have to say that I'm a little bit disappointed in the wedding dress because it looks nice. I like that it's not white, and actually this pale blush pink color was very fashionable apparently at the time, but I feel like it's lacking something. I do like the fact that the train is removable. I think that's a very nice touch. I'm not sure if that's period accurate, but I really like it, and I think it matches Penelope's personality because she changes herself a lot. She has these two different identities. So I think it's interesting to see that in her wardrobe too, that her dresses also have several identities themselves. But still, I would like to have seen something a bit more special or more elaborate for her. And I think that that it's a crime that we don't get to see more of that gorgeous corset that she's wearing underneath her wedding dress. It doesn't seem to be super period accurate, and she's also wearing it on her bare skin. She's not wearing it over a chemise, and that makes me die inside a little, but still it's a beautiful piece of clothing, and I really think that it deserves more screen time. Let's do a super quick roundup of the other characters. First, Eloise. I'm a bit disappointed with Eloise's wardrobe this season because in previous seasons I really loved her way of mixing kind of masculine elements or more structured elements that hinted at some like scholarly details, and I think that showed her personality really well. But this season she's dressing just like anyone else. I think that also has to do with her friendship with Cressida and the fact that she may be trying to blend in more and in society, but I still miss her old style, and it makes me sad that we are not seeing it again. Next, Cressida. I like what they did with her about like making these super exaggerated sleeves and these over-the-top dresses kind of her defining feature, and the effect sometimes remind me of like a Disney villain, which I think matches her character really well. What I don't like is that hideous neck corset thing that she wears, and like that whole outfit was a mess, like nothing fit well. But aside from that, I think it's a fun character. Okay, so Colin. I read that the costume designers wanted to make him kind of like a cowboy pirate thing, and I think they kind of achieved that, like especially in the first scenes where we see him coming out of the boat, like from his super big travel around the world and whatever, and I think that was nice. I'm not quite sure the actor really embodied that pirate cowboy thing, but he tried. I really dislike his animal print striped waistcoat. I think it was horrible and didn't match anything and was actually distracting, but I'm glad that they make it up with some other very nice waistcoats that he gets to wear in the whole series. Okay, Penelope's sisters. Penelope's sisters are stupid, but I really love them. Their costumes are all over the place and the colors are horrible and they clash with each other and they are full of unnecessary details and stuff that shouldn't be there. But I think their costumes match their personalities so well, and for me they are 10 out of 10. And now let's take a closer look at Penelope's dresses. And to do that, I'm going to use this Bridgerton-inspired dress that I made in claw so we can actually see the patterns and understand the shapes on the body. To make this dress, I first looked at some of my favorite Penelope dresses of this season, and I realized that they are mostly the same dress. These two bluish greenish dresses are probably my favorites from the whole season, especially this one with the floral embroidery. I think it's gorgeous, and they are essentially very similar. They have these short bodies that stops at the underbust. That's what we usually call an empire waist, which is according to the silhouette of the period. And then we have this skirt that falls straight to the ground, where the volume is mostly concentrated at the back. That features several pleats that make this beautiful effect when she moves. Penelope and mostly everyone else in the series usually wears these short, puffy sleeves and quite a generous neckline. And actually this neckline is not entirely inaccurate. Regency people did show some skin, but it was mostly at night during parties. During the day, they covered up the neckline, usually with a chemisette or some kind of handkerchief they called fichu. And for me, it's very interesting the shape of these bodies, because in probably all of her dresses, the bodice is shaped with 3 darts at the side of the bust. 3 darts that actually go up quite high. And I like this feature because thanks to these darts, they have been able to contour her body very nicely. And we also see those 3 darts on her wedding dress. I'm not a fan of this dress. I like the shape of the neckline and the darts, but I think it looks a bit boring. And also this shape in the waist, it's a dress that is much more fitted to the waist than her other dresses, and actually it has this kind of princess seams or maybe darts that help to make the dress closer to the body. And this whole silhouette, it kind of takes me out of the world building because it's a shape that is so different not only from what she usually wears, but also from everyone else on the series. I think that the only other character that has a similar shape in her dresses is actually her mother. So maybe that was an intentional reference because this is the season when Penelope kind of reconciles with her mom and they understand each other better. But as I said, I'm not a fan of this dress. I think my favorite feature of it are actually the sleeves because they are super cute. But let's go back to the other dresses because now that we have taken a look at the inspiration, let me show you my process for creating a dress that reflects all of this. So to make this dress, I started from my base bodice pattern to create the basic shape of the torso. And the first thing I did was to rotate the dart to the side so that I could start modifying the neckline. So I could draw a neckline shape more or less how I wanted, and then I cut the pieces. Then I created a line to mark the high empire waist right at the underbust, and I rotated the dart again, this time to the shoulder, so that I could decide the placement of the 3 bust darts. I distributed the shoulder dart into the bust darts, and now I started with some of the smaller details like fixing the neckline shaping and adjusting the position of the darts. I also gave the darts a bit of a curve because I think that this way they can adapt better to the body. Next, I adjusted the sleeve and the armhole, gave some shaping to the underbust seam, and removed some gaping at the neckline. Once I was done with that, I added volume to the sleeve and some extra length to give it a nice fall over the gathered edge. And finally, I started an epic battle against the pleats in claw, which ended in me doing the pleats myself with good old math, because like everyone knows, the pleats tool in claw only works when there's a full moon and you run around your computer 3 times clockwise, so I'm going to spare you the process. Basically, what I wanted was to create big pleats to mimic the shape of the pleats of the dresses that she wears. I'm not doing as many pleats as she has on her dresses, because I think the center pleat is a double pleat, and I think that claw had enough with just the regular pleat, so I didn't want to add anything extra on top of that, but the idea is mostly the same. So in the end, look, we have nice pleats, and next I'm just going to add a trim to the neckline and gather that a bit. Then I tried some different fabrics, but in the end I decided to do a base fabric with an embroidery overlay, just like in some of the dresses that we have seen in the series. So I cloned all the layers and applied the embroidery fabric on top of a solid fabric that acted as the base of the dress. So after I spent an enormous amount of time playing with the scale and the placement of the lace, we have a Bridgerton dress. I hope this was helpful to understand the basic structure of these dresses, and maybe this can inspire you to create your own. If that's the case, please let me know and show me the pictures. So this has been my take on Bridgerton costumes. In the end, even though they are silly at times and not at all period accurate, I really like them. I think they work really well because they don't take themselves too seriously, and the whole series itself doesn't take itself too seriously. So for me, they are very fun to watch. I hope that this has been somewhat entertaining. I like to do more videos talking about the costumes in other series, so if you have any recommendations, please leave them down below in the comments. And of course, let me know what you think about Bridgerton costumes. Let me know which one was your favorite or your least favorite, or if for you the historical inaccuracies are too much, or like anything really, because I would love any excuse to talk more about this series. That's all for now. Let's see each other in the next video, which may be next week if we are lucky. So until then, have fun!